It is Sunday, December 21st, 9:09 a.m., 2025. This is Winter Solace, Cosmic Weapon of Thule, and this is another video for the Winter Solace podcast for the month. You can find me at wintersolaceproductions.com, wintersolacemerch.myspreadshop.com, YouTube.com Roller Derby, Instagram Cosmic Weapon of Thule, on X, Telegram, and then our Telegram chat, Facebook, eBay, Cosmic Weapon of Thule at Substack.com. We accept donations via Cash App at hashtag WSCWOT. This is in the older format with all the articles because I didn't have time to prepare a PowerPoint. However, we're going to talk about the Somali welfare fraud. Now, I'm not going to make any inferences on the Somalis themselves, as there's somebody who has put that more eloquently, and I have every intention of letting him just say his piece on this.
Somalians ripped off that state for billions of dollars. Billions. Every year. Billions of dollars. And they contribute nothing. The welfare is like 88%. They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you, okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country. Their country's no good for a reason. Their country stinks, and we don't want them in our country. I can say that about other countries, too. I can say it about other countries, too. We don't want them to hell. We have to rebuild our country. You know, our country's at a tipping point. We could go bad. We're at a tipping point. I don't know if people mind me saying that, but I'm saying it. We could go one way or the other, and we're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country. Ilhan Omar is garbage. She's garbage. Her friends are garbage. These aren't people that work. These aren't people that say, let's go, come on, let's make this place great. These are people that do nothing but complain. They complain. And from where they came from, they got nothing. You know, they came from paradise, and they said, this isn't paradise. But when they come from hell, and they complain and do nothing but bitch, we don't want them in our country. Let them go back to where they came from and fix it.
Okay, now for people who don't know me, or who don't know me that well, or who don't, care about all these details, I grew up an hour north of the Twin Cities, in a little town that's not even really on the map, and where it was about a 20-minute to an hour drive. And part of the reason I moved to Wisconsin was because I got tired of driving over an hour one way to go work at a warehouse in Brooklyn Park at 2 in the morning. That's part of why I eventually determined I should relocate to Wisconsin, as the cost of living in Minnesota is completely unaffordable for somebody who wanted to move out of their mom's basement. And another reason that I relocated was the influx of immigration and political factors from Somalia to the general Minnesota area. Now, I want to be transparent with this. I live in an area where there's plenty of Hmong Chinese immigrants, and everyone gets along, and there's no problems. I go eat Mexican food all the time, I eat Chinese food all the time, all that. So I have nothing against other cultures and anything like that. However, okay, there's some stuff with Somalia where they're not necessarily... My mother had to work with a bunch of them, and because they didn't use toilet paper when they went to the restroom, there was some sanitary issues, some complaints, and all of those, the people doing that got promoted to go work from home. That's the kind of thing that is there, and the 9/11 hijackers were trained at flight schools in Minnesota. Now, I do believe... Now, whether or not you want to go down the rabbit holes of 9/11, I mean, there's obvious proof that the planes were hijacked and crashed into stuff. The Somali community and all of that is just a hotbed for fraud. Now, the White House actually put out their own articles and their own journalism linking to mainstream news sources and all these other things, explaining the massive Somali welfare fraud and Tampon Tim being a complete failure. Like, that has got to be the worst state politician state official or governor I've ever remembered in my lifetime. I mean, it's like, they don't even hide how he's so terrible. Like, when that guy from his staff went and killed all those people or whatever, it's like, nobody cared. I mean, the people there cared, obviously, but it's like, there were not, endless conspiracy theories. Like, that point didn't react. It was like, mainstream media, who's supposed to prop him up, he's just terrible. Now, depending on who you talk to, the amount of fraud goes anywhere between, it was like 250 million at one point, to 1 billion, to 4 billion, to 18 billion, to unlimited Obamacare fraud. And most of the people that are being charged in all of this are of Somali ancestry. And I don't even hate the people of Somalia themselves. I don't necessarily believe Ilhan Omar needs to be deported. I mean, unless there is an immigration issue there. I looked into that thing where she may have married her brother or whatever, and that's one of those. If somebody wants to go down that rabbit hole, I'm sure there are things that they can find, but whether or not that took place, really, the world keeps spinning. Most of this is, Tim Walz just failing egregiously. Like, I think he finally, after all the pressure, made a committee or something to look at it and try to find the glaring, obvious fraud. But, maybe they'll do better than Bill Barr did. We'll just go with that. Now, Trump responded by terminating effectively immediately TPS status for the Somali community. Okay, I mean, that's him looking at this, and then now you're starting to see some of this. This is from the DOJ, U.S. Attorney's Office. Defendants charged in first wave of housing stabilization fraud cases. Minnesota, 8 defendants have been federally charged with wire fraud for their roles in a massive housing stabilization fraud scheme. Today we announced the first wave of charges in a massive fraud in Minnesota's housing stabilization program. I want to be clear of the scope of the crisis. What we see are schemes stacked upon schemes, draining resources meant for those in need. It never ends. I spent my career as a federal prosecutor, and the depth of the fraud in Minnesota takes my breath away, and it must be stopped. As set forth in the charging documents, the defendants devised and carried out schemes to defraud federally funded health care benefits in Minnesota collected within Minnesota's Housing Stability Service Program. The HSS program dates back to July 22, when Minnesota became the first state in the country to offer Medicaid coverage for housing stabilization services. The program was designed to help people with disabilities, including seniors, people with mental illnesses, substance abuse disorders, find and maintain housing. Rather than provide such help, the defendants obtained and misappropriated millions of dollars in program funds that were intended as reimbursement for services provided to those people. The program permitted reimbursement for the four principal kinds of service: housing consultation, housing transition services, housing sustaining services, and moving expenses. Now, okay, if you move and you pay a company to move you, there is obvious, it's cut and dry. You're paying somebody to move. They're going to show up with a truck. Some guys are going to come out, load all your crap in it, and take it somewhere else. These other 3 things, consultation, transition services, housing sustaining services, Okay, all of that, yeah, that's what it says on paper, but you can pretty much do whatever you want. And you see this a lot in medical fraud and all kinds of fraud, and there are people whose sole occupation is to just go to rehab. And in these rehab centers, just say you got to go do this for treatment, and the treatment is an hour class where you listen to a single song, and then they bill the insurance like some exorbitant amount of money for that, and it all just gets funneled back into costs or completely inflated salaries and everything else. And because what you pay out of your insurance, is not an amount of money you're going to notice, nobody thinks about or realizes how it's stacked upon each other. But by design, the programs had low barriers for entry for new providers and for beneficiaries. The program also had minimal requirements for reimbursement. The HSS program's low barriers to entry and minimal record requirements for reimbursement combined to make the program susceptible to fraud. Before that program's inaugural year, the program was predicted to cost $2.6 million annually. That proved to be inaccurate. In 2021 alone, the program paid out more than $21 million in claims, $42 million in 2022, $74 million in 2023, $104 million in 2024, $122 is projected for this year. However, they found the fraud, and this is basically just a free money spigot that has just been turned off. A federal investigation revealed that many program providers defrauded the system. These providers acquired the names of program-eligible beneficiaries from facilities like addiction treatment centers, and they used those individuals' information to submit inflated and fake reimbursement campaigns. In this fashion, the providers acquired substantial payouts of taxpayer money to which they were not entitled. They used those ill-gotten gains for their own enrichment. First defendant charged in autism fraud scheme. One person defrauded the autism program, carried out Feeding Our Future fraud, bought real estate in Kenya with taxpayer money. Asha Farhan Hassan, age 28, was charged today by federal information with wire fraud for her role in a $14 million autism fraud scheme. Hassan was also charged in participating in the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme, for which she received $465,000. Today's charge marks the first in an ongoing investigation into fraud in the EIDBI autism program. It's not an isolated scheme, and see, this is what I was talking about. As set forth in the information, Hassan and others devised and carried out a scheme to defraud the Early Intensive Developmental and Behavioral Intervention Benefit, a publicly funded Minnesota healthcare program. It offers medically necessary services to people under the age of 21 with autism spectrum disorder, ASD. According to the Minnesota Department of Human Services website, the purpose of the EIDBI program was to provide medically necessary and early and intensive intervention for people with this. Applied behavior analysis, some say called ABA therapy, is a type of one-on-one behavioral therapy designed to help children on the autism spectrum develop social and emotional skills. ABA therapy seeks to improve social skills by rewarding and reinforcing them, and that's just said what it does. In order to qualify for the EIDI benefit program, a person must be under 21 years of age, be diagnosed, and then enrolled in qualifying healthcare programs such as Medicaid. Because this crap is expensive. Like all this crap, like all this specialty extra stuff, it's expensive. Like, I have to get a dental procedure done, and it took me an entire year and going to 3 different places just to get somewhere I could even afford. And it still is cheaper for me to press a record than what I would probably have to pay to get all that done. From November 2019 through December 2024, Asha Hassan and others devised and carried out a scheme to defraud the EIDBI Autism Services Program. Hassan formed and registered Smarts Therapy LLC with the Minnesota Secretary of State in November of 2019. Hassan listed herself as the sole owner of Smart Therapy In reality, other individuals also had ownership stakes in the company, but they were not listed on the documents, including because one of the owners previously owned an adult daycare was excluded by DHS for 3 years due to her conduct running this. Shortly after forming the company, Hassan enrolled Smart Therapy as a provider agency in the EIDBI program. And they enroll, basically, so they build a company and they enroll it in all of this stuff. And then Smart Therapy purported to be providing necessary one-on-one ABA therapy to children with autism. In fact, Smart Therapy employed underqualified individuals as behavioral technicians. These behavioral technicians were often 18 or 19-year-old relatives with no formal education beyond high school and no training or certifications related to the treatment of autism. To run their fraud scheme, Hassan and her partners needed children who had an autism diagnosis and an individual treatment plan. Hassan and her partners approached parents in the Somali community to recruit their children into Smart Therapy. Where a child did not have an autism diagnosis and an individual treatment plan, Hassan and her partners worked with QSP to get the required recruited child qualified for autism services. There was no child that Smart Therapy was not able to get qualified for autism services. As a recruitment tactic to drive up enrollment, Hassan and her partners paid monthly cash kickback payments to the parents of children who enrolled in their children in the Smart Therapy to receive autism services. Kickback payments ranged from approximately $300 to $1,500 per month per child. The amount of these payments was contingent on the services DHS authorized a child to receive, and the higher the authorization amount, the higher the kickback. Often parents threatened to leave Smart Therapy and take their children to other autism centers if they did not get paid higher kickbacks. Several larger families left Smart Therapy after being offered larger kickbacks by other autism centers. Hassan and her partners covered the cost of the kickback payments, and Smart Therapy paid the payments through fraudulent billing to Medicaid. So basically, you have these groups of Somalis that make these companies that then compete with each other to cater these people whose children have an autism diagnosis just to receive all of this. Basically, they turn their children into income-generating tools. And they submitted millions of dollars worth of claims, and all of these are just backed up by fraudulent records with no investigations. Now, the main one has been the Feeding Our Future fraud investigation, where 78 people have been charged. Money laundering, bribery. It is calling it the largest case of pandemic fraud in the country. Now, you wonder why these people do this. Well, okay, this is a guy from Maine, a Somali-American man in Maine accused of defrauding the U.S. government. The center for the alleged scheme this time in Maine is Dr. Abdullah Ali, the executive director of Health Human Services Contractors to Gateway Community Services. For years, false records were filed for services that were never provided. Okay, now this is what these people do with this money. So this guy goes, this doctor, whoever, and then gets all these government kickbacks. While serving his role in Maine, Ali was also running for the president of Jubaland in Africa, which is a province of Somali, where he boasted to a Kenyan media outlet that he helped raise funds for the Jubaland Somali army to help the troops buy weapons, bullets, and food. Now, what is the Jubaland Somali army? The official name of this is a Jubaland Dervish Force. I'm not even going to try to... okay, and I'm going to be honest. Whatever the first name... The term force in Somalian language almost sounds like chlamydia. Okay, that's what they call their strike forces in Somalian language, is a word that sounds like chlamydia that I'm not even going to try to pronounce. Now, they work with the Somali army. They claim to fight Al-Shabaab. It's just some other national army. Well, it's not deemed a terrorist group. You know, that's what they do with this. They come here, and then they raise money off the government, And that's how you get stuff like the largest funder of Al-Shabaab, which is a terrorist organization, is the Minnesota taxpayer. Because that's where all this money gets funneled back to. And so you get all of this fraud. What a lot of these people do is they save up money, send it back to Somalia, or relocate back there at some point if they can find a safe area to live. But here's what it costs for things in Somalia. Meal at an inexpensive restaurant, $3.25. Lettuce, 88 cents. Pound of potatoes, 64 cents. Price of gas is about $1.03 per liter. Now, a compact car equivalent is about $5,750 there. Here in America, that's about $20,000 plus. Their monthly net salary there is $319 a month. Somalia has been in a civil war state of some sort since an individual named Syed Barre led resistance to the military group there and Revolutionary Socialist Party. So, leftists, globalists, basically just completely destabilize this place. And it's perpetually been in a civil war forever of Islam's fighting. And then they go all over the world, and it's just piracy, and now they're just taking all of the money from the taxpayers. So that's a rough breakdown of the Somali welfare fraud. People even needed more information to understand how a lot of this worked.